The most expensive phone call in history wasn't a business deal. It was a rejection. Julian wanted to impress his business rivals. So when his wife begged for a ride home, sobbing that she couldn't see the road, he didn't just say no. He let the whole room listen to her cry. And then he hung up. 5 minutes later, the line went dead for real. Watch closely. Because the man laughing right now, he is about to spend the rest of this story on his knees. Does he deserve forgiveness? Tell me in the comments. If you love stories about second chances, betrayal, and groveling until it hurts, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our stories. I want to know who is watching this heartbreak with me. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your country or city in the comments. Let's see how far Eva's story has traveled. Now, back to the grovel. The poker table gleamed under the amber glow of the chandelier, cards scattered like broken promises across green felt. Julian Vance didn't need to look at his hand to know he was winning. He could read it in the way Marcus Chen's jaw tightened, in the subtle twitch of Richard Holt's left eye. These men, titans of industry, billionaires who'd carved empires from nothing, were crumbling under the weight of his cold, calculated stare. But it wasn't the game that made Julian's pulse quicken tonight. It was her. Elena Winters sat draped across the arm of his chair like a designer accessory, her crimson dress a deliberate provocation. She wasn't his mistress, not technically, but the way she laughed at his jokes, the way her fingers traced absent patterns on his shoulder, told a different story. A story Julian wanted these men to believe. Because in their world, power wasn't measured in stock portfolios alone. It was measured in control. And nothing said control quite like a beautiful woman who wasn't your wife, hanging on your every word, while your actual wife sat alone in some forgotten corner of the city. "Your move, Vance," Marcus said, his voice tight. Julian's phone buzzed against the table. Eva's name lit up the screen. He glanced at it, then deliberately turned the phone face up so everyone could see. The buzzing continued, insistent, desperate. "Your wife?" Richard asked, eyebrow raised. "She'll survive," Julian said, his voice carrying just enough dismissive amusement to earn a chuckle from the table. The phone went silent. He played his hand, a full house. Marcus swore under his breath. The phone rang again. This time, Elena picked it up, her perfectly manicured fingers dancing across the screen. "Should I answer?" she purred, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell her you're busy?" The table erupted in laughter. Julian felt it then, that intoxicating rush of dominance, of being the alpha in a room full of predators. This was what he'd worked for. This was what he'd become. "Put it on speaker," he heard himself say. The words came out smooth, confident. But somewhere deep in his chest, something small and forgotten whispered a warning he chose to ignore. Elena pressed the button. "Julian?" Eva's voice cracked through the speaker, and it wasn't the sound he'd expected. It wasn't the cool, measured tone of the woman who'd learned to match his coldness with her own. This was something else, something raw. "Julian, please pick up. I can't." Eva. His name for her was a blade, sharp, efficient. "I'm in a meeting." "I know, I'm sorry, Her breathing was wrong, ragged, panicked. "Something's wrong. I'm dizzy, I can't see straight, and I'm still at the office. The parking garage is empty and "You're fine," Julian cut her off, aware of every eye at the table, watching this display of dominance. "You're always fine. You're just mad I didn't come home for dinner." "No, Julian, please listen. Elena thinks you'll be home in 20 minutes, he said, letting cruelty sharpen each word. "To check my phone to see where I am. Am I wrong?" Silence. Then so quietly he almost missed it. "I'm scared." "Stop the performance, Eva." He didn't recognize his own voice anymore. When had it become this? When had he become capable of hearing genuine fear and mistaking it for manipulation? "I'll be home when I'm home. Julian, I can't see the road." The sound that came through the speaker wasn't supposed to happen. It was the screech of tires, high-pitched and horrifying. It was glass shattering. It was the hollow thud of metal meeting something immovable. Then, nothing. Just the empty static of a connection that was technically still live, but spiritually dead. Julian's hand, which had been reaching to end the call with a flourish, froze mid-air. The poker table had gone silent. Elena's face had drained of color. Marcus was already standing, phone to his ear. "Eva?" Julian's voice cracked on her name. "Eva, answer me." The static continued, indifferent to his panic. And in that moment, as 5 seconds stretched into an eternity, Julian Vance realized he'd just made the most expensive mistake of his life. The cost wouldn't be measured in money. It would be measured in everything else. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and regret. Julian had been sitting in the same plastic chair for 6 hours, his $1,000 suit rumpled, his face buried in hands that still trembled. Marcus had driven him here. Marcus, his rival, the man he'd been trying to humiliate at that poker table. Marcus, who'd said nothing during the entire ride except "she'll be okay," in a tone that suggested he knew Julian didn't deserve that kindness. The accident should have killed her. That's what the paramedics told him when they'd pulled her from the wreckage. Her car had veered off the rain-slicked road, hit a concrete barrier at 45 miles per hour. The driver's side had crumpled like paper. But Eva wasn't dead. Eva was in surgery, and Julian was learning that there were worse things than death, like waiting to find out if the person you destroyed would survive long enough for you to apologize. "Mr. Vance?" He looked up. The doctor was young, tired, her scrubs marked with evidence of the battle she'd just fought in the operating room. Julian tried to read her expression and found nothing. She'd probably perfected that neutral mask years ago, learned to deliver both miracles and tragedies with the same carefully measured tone. "She's alive," the doctor said, and Julian's lungs remembered how to work. Stable. We had to relieve some pressure on her brain from the impact, but the surgery went well. "When can I see her?" "Soon." The doctor paused, choosing her next words carefully. "But you need to understand something first. Your wife has sustained a traumatic brain injury. When she wakes up, and we're optimistic she will, there may be complications." "What kind of complications?" "Memory loss is common in cases like this. She may not remember the accident. She may not remember recent events leading up to it." The doctor's eyes held his, and Julian wondered what she'd heard about the circumstances of the crash. In some cases, patients experience what we call retrograde amnesia. They lose access to memories from before the trauma. Julian nodded mechanically, not really hearing. Eva was alive, that was all that mattered. He'd apologize, he'd beg, he'd become whatever she needed him to be, if she'd just open her eyes and forgive him for. "Mr. Vance?" The doctor's voice turned sharp. "Did you hear what I said? Your wife may not remember you. She may not remember your marriage. We won't know the extent of it until she wakes up." That got his attention. How much could she forget? There's no way to predict. It could be days, months, or years. The brain is years. The word came out strangled. In rare cases, yes. The good news is that memories often return, though the process can be unpredictable. What matters now is that she's alive and stable. The doctor stood. "You can see her in about an hour, once we've moved her to ICU. But Mr. Vance?" She paused at the door. "When you see her, remember that she's been through significant trauma. Whatever she says or doesn't say, your job is to keep her calm. Stress can impede recovery. Do you understand?" Julian understood. He understood that the universe had a sick sense of humor. He'd spent 3 years systematically destroying his wife's spirit, turning the vibrant woman he'd married into a ghost who flinched when he entered a room. And now, when he finally understood what he'd done, when remorse was clawing through his chest like a living thing, she might not even remember him. Might not remember why she'd learned to fear his voice. Might not remember the affair he'd flaunted, the cruel words, the deliberate neglect. An hour later, a nurse led him through sterile corridors to Eva's room. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her face pale against white sheets, her dark hair fanned across the pillow. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring vitals that meant she was alive, she was here, she was... Her eyes opened. Julian's heart stopped, then started again. Too fast, too hard. "Eva?" He moved closer, careful, like approaching something wild and wounded. "Eva, it's me. Can you hear me?" Her eyes found his face, focused, and something happened that Julian wasn't prepared for. She smiled. Not the tight, practiced smile she'd perfected over 3 years of unhappy marriage. Not the polite mask she wore to his business dinners. This was something else entirely. This smile lit up her entire face, made her eyes crinkle at the corners, transformed her into someone Julian hadn't seen in so long he'd almost forgotten she existed. "Julian," she whispered, and his name in her mouth sounded like a prayer. "You came." "Of course I came. You were in an accident." "An accident?" She looked confused. "What accident? Did I fall or something?" She tried to sit up, winced, fell back against the pillows. "Ow! Okay, maybe I did more than fall. What happened?" Julian stared at her. The doctor's warning echoed in his mind. Memory loss, retrograde amnesia, days, months, or years. "Eva," he said carefully, "what's the last thing you remember?" She frowned, thinking. I was in the library, at school, studying for finals. I texted you that I might be late for our coffee date because Professor Chen wanted to discuss my thesis proposal." Her frown deepened. "Did I miss it? God, Julian, I'm so sorry. You probably waited for hours. Were you mad?" Coffee date, school, Professor Chen, the library at Stanford, where they'd met 10 years ago. "Eva," Julian's voice came out hoarse. "What year is it?" "What?" She laughed, then stopped when she saw his face. "That's a weird question. It's 2016, May 2016. Why are you... Julian, you're scaring me. What's going on?" She thought it was 2016. She thought she was 18 years old. And the way she was looking at him, with complete trust, with undisguised affection, with the kind of open adoration she'd shown him when he was just Leo, the scholarship kid who tutored her in economics. That look was going to destroy him, because Julian knew something Eva didn't. The woman looking at him with such pure, uncomplicated love had no idea she was staring at the man who'd spent 3 years systematically breaking her. If you were him, would you tell her the truth right now? Or would you stay quiet? Drop your answer in the comments, because what happens next will shock you. Julian did what any coward would do. He lied. "You're right," he said, forcing his voice steady. "It's May 2016. You hit your head. The doctors say you're going to be fine." Eva's face relaxed into relief. "Thank God. I thought for a second, the way you were looking at me, I thought something really bad happened." She reached for his hand, and when her fingers closed around his, Julian felt something inside him crack. "You look different, though. Did you get a haircut? And that suit?" Her eyes widened. "Julian, that's not a thrift store suit. That's like designer. How did you—" "Don't worry about that now," he cut her off gently. "Just rest. The doctor said, where's my phone?" "I need to call my dad. He's probably freaking out." She looked around the hospital room, then back at him with sudden urgency. "And I need to check in with the office. The Nakamoto merger meeting is tomorrow. And if I'm not there, Marcus will try to—" "Eva." Julian's brain was racing. The Nakamoto merger. That had happened 7 years ago. Eva had been instrumental in closing that deal, back when she was still her father's right hand, before Julian had convinced her to step back, to let him run the company they'd merged, before he'd taken everything that was hers and made it his. "The merger will be fine, I promise." She studied him, and for a terrifying moment, he thought she saw through him. But then she smiled again. That heartbreaking smile that belonged to a girl who hadn't yet learned what he was capable of. "Okay," she said softly. "If you say so, I trust you." Those 4 words, "I trust you," hit harder than any accusation could have. Because 18-year-old Eva had trusted him completely, and 30-year-old Julian had taken that trust and shattered it into something unrecognizable. The door opened. A nurse came in to check vitals, and Julian stepped into the hallway, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. He had decisions to make. Fast. First decision. Did he tell her the truth? That it wasn't 2016? That they were married? That she'd called him tonight, begging for help, and he'd hung up on her? The truth would be the honest thing to do. The right thing. But the truth would also break her. And hadn't he done enough of that? Second decision. If he didn't tell her the truth, how did he explain the world she was about to wake up into? The penthouse apartment, the fleet of cars, the empire built on her father's company, the complete absence of the people she loved, because he'd systematically isolated her from friends and family over the years. His phone buzzed. Elena. He'd forgotten about Elena. "Where are you? Is she okay? Call me." Julian stared at the text. Elena, who'd been at that poker table. Elena, who'd answered Eva's call. Elena, who Eva, the 18-year-old Eva who'd just woken up, wouldn't even recognize. He deleted the message without responding. Third decision. How long could he keep this charade going? A day? A week? And what happened when her memory came back? Because the doctors said it would, eventually. She'd remember everything. The affairs, the cruelty, the systematic dismantling of who she used to be. She'd remember that phone call. "Mr. Vance?" The doctor from earlier approached, her expression concerned. "We need to talk about your wife's condition." They moved to a private consultation room. The doctor closed the door. "I understand she's awake and alert. which is excellent news. But I also understand from the nursing staff that she believes it's 2016. Is that correct? Julian nodded, not trusting his voice. Mr. Vance, I need to be very clear with you. Your wife's brain has experienced significant trauma. The amnesia may be temporary, or it may persist for some time. What's crucial now is that we don't add to her stress by forcing memories before her brain is ready. The doctor leaned forward. That means we need to be very careful about correcting her misconceptions. If she thinks it's 2016, we don't forcibly tell her it's 2026. We let her come to that realization gradually, in a supported environment. So I'm supposed to just play along? You're supposed to keep her stable and safe while her brain heals. That might mean not challenging her perceptions right now. The doctor paused. Though I have to ask, what was her life like in 2016? Because she's going to expect that world when she leaves here. Julian thought about 2016. Eva had been everything then. Brilliant, fearless. Running her father's company with an instinct for business that had impressed even his harshest critics. She'd been the heir apparent, the golden child, the woman everyone wanted to be or be with. And Julian had been nobody. The scholarship student from the wrong side of everything, wearing borrowed suits to meetings, trying to prove he belonged in her world. She was different, he said finally. She was better. The doctor's expression softened. Memory loss cases like this are tricky. Sometimes patients remember their feelings before they remember facts. She may remember how she felt about people before she remembers specific events. She stood. We'll keep her for observation for a few more days. You should use that time to prepare for her discharge. Think about what her environment needs to look like. Think about how you're going to support her through this. After the doctor left, Julian sat alone in that small room and faced a truth he'd been avoiding. The universe had given him an impossible gift. A second chance with a version of Eva who didn't hate him yet. And Julian Vance, who'd built an empire on ruthless decisions, who'd learned to spot opportunities in chaos, who'd trained himself to take advantage of any weakness, now had to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. Did he use this amnesia to rewrite history? To become the husband he should have been? To make her fall in love with the man he was now, before her memories returned and revealed the monster he'd been? Or did he tell her the truth and watch her leave him all over again? He returned to her room. Eva was asleep, her face peaceful in the dim light. Julian pulled a chair beside her bed and did something he hadn't done in years. He watched his wife sleep. And he let himself remember who they used to be. Eva woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back. The hospital. The accident she couldn't recall. Julian's strange expression when she'd asked about the date. Julian was asleep in the chair beside her bed, his head tilted at an angle that would leave his neck aching. He looked exhausted. He also looked different in ways she couldn't quite name. Older, yes, but it was more than that. There was something harder about his features, something sharp in the set of his jaw, even in sleep. She studied him, this boy, this man she'd been in love with for 2 years. They'd met in an economics seminar her sophomore year. She'd been the professor's favorite, the heiress everyone knew about. He'd been the quiet transfer student who sat in the back and said little, but wrote papers that made their professor actually pause and rethink his own positions. She'd noticed him immediately, mostly because he was the only person in the room who didn't notice her. It had taken her 3 weeks to engineer a reason to talk to him. Another week to convince him to tutor her. She didn't need tutoring, but he didn't need to know that. 2 months before he'd kissed her, terrified in the stacks of the library after a study session that had gone past midnight. He'd pulled back immediately, apologizing, saying he shouldn't have done that. He wasn't good enough for her. Her father would kill him. She'd kissed him again to shut him up. That was 18 months ago, by her count. They'd been dating ever since, though dating seemed too small a word for what they had. Leo. She called him Leo, his middle name, because it suited him better than Julian. Understood her in ways no one else did. He saw past the heiress, past the corporate princess, to the woman who just wanted to build something that mattered. And she'd seen past the scholarship kid, past the worn-out shoes and careful budgeting, to the most brilliant mind she'd ever encountered. So why did he look at her now, like she was something precious and broken? "You're staring," Julian said without opening his eyes. "You're awake." He opened his eyes then, and Eva caught it again, that flash of something painful in his expression, before he smoothed it away. "How are you feeling?" "Confused," she admitted. "The doctors keep asking me weird questions, and you're acting strange. What aren't you telling me?" She watched him weigh his response, saw the moment he made a decision. "You hit your head pretty hard," he said carefully. "The doctors think you might have some memory gaps. They asked me not to overwhelm you with information while you're recovering." "Memory gaps about what?" "They don't know yet. That's why they're being cautious." He leaned forward, and something in his eyes made her chest tighten. "Eva, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" "Of course I trust you. Leo, you're scaring me." He flinched when she said Leo. Actually flinched, like the name hurt. "What?" she demanded. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, I just..." He stopped, seemed to gather himself. "I need to make some calls. Arrange some things for when you're discharged. Will you be okay for a few minutes?" She wanted to say no. She wanted to make him explain why he was looking at her like she might disappear. But she also saw the exhaustion carved into his features, the tension in his shoulders. "Go," she said. "Make your calls. But Leo, come back. I promise." After he left, Eva tried to reconstruct what she remembered. She'd been at the library studying. She'd texted Leo about being late. And then, nothing. Just a blank space where memory should be. A nurse came in to check her vitals. Eva tried asking questions. How long had she been here? What day was it exactly? Had anyone else come to visit? But got only vague, carefully neutral responses. Finally, she asked the most important question. "Can I see my phone?" The nurse hesitated. "Your personal effects weren't brought in with you. Your husband might have them." "Husband?" Eva laughed. "I think you mean boyfriend. We're not married." The nurse's expression did something complicated. "I'll let your husband know you're asking for your phone." Before Eva could correct her again, the nurse was gone. Husband. That was the second time someone had called Leo her husband. It was ridiculous. They hadn't even talked about marriage yet. Leo was still finishing his degree. She was focused on learning everything she could before taking over her father's company. Marriage was years away. The door opened, But it wasn't Leo. It was her father. Dad. Eva's relief was overwhelming. Finally, someone who can tell me what's actually going on. But her father didn't rush to her bedside. He stood in the doorway, his face strange, and when he spoke, his voice was tight with emotion. Evie, thank God you're awake. Dad, what's wrong? Why is everyone acting so weird? He moved closer then, slowly, like he wasn't sure she was real. When he reached the bed, he took her hand in both of his. And Eva realized with shock that her father, Robert Chen, the man who'd built a tech empire, who'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, was crying. Dad? They said you might not remember, he said quietly. The doctors warned me. But seeing you look at me like it's... He stopped, swallowed hard. Like it's before. Before what? The question hung between them. Her father looked older than she remembered. There were more lines around his eyes, more gray in his hair. Dad, how long was I unconscious? 2 days. But Eva, then why do you look like you've aged 5 years? The silence that followed was answer enough. No, Eva whispered. No, that's not possible. It's May 2016. I was just at the library. Evie, listen to me. How long? Her voice broke. How long has it been? Her father's hand tightened on hers. 10 years, baby. It's 2026. You're 28 years old. The world tilted. Eva heard herself make a sound that wasn't quite a word, wasn't quite a scream. That's not possible. I can't have lost 10 years. I would know. I would remember. The doctors say it's temporary. Your memories will come back. But Eva wasn't listening anymore, because if it was 2026, that meant, where's Leo? The question came out panicked. Dad, where's Leo? I want to see him. Get him, please get him. Now, Dad, get Leo. The door burst open. Julian stood there, breathing hard like he'd run. His eyes found hers, and something in them made her chest ache. I'm here, he said. Eva, I'm right here. But that wasn't right, because this wasn't Leo. This man in the expensive suit, with the hard edges and careful control. This wasn't the boy who'd kissed her in the library, who'd held her hand like it was something miraculous, who'd looked at her like she was magic. Where is he? She demanded. Where's Leo? Julian went very still. I don't understand. Leo. Julian Leo Vance. My Leo. Where is he? She was crying now, hysteria climbing her throat. Something's wrong. You're wrong. You look like him, but you're not. You're not him. Where's Leo? What did you do with him? And Julian, this man who looked like Leo but wasn't, couldn't be, stood frozen as understanding crashed over his features. She wasn't asking for another man. She was asking for him, for the version of him that no longer existed. Tell me in the comments, is the person she fell in love with dead? Can people really change this much? What do you think happened to Leo? Julian sent Robert out. He needed to handle this alone. Eva, he approached her carefully, the way he'd learned to approach frightened things. I need you to breathe. Can you do that for me? You're not Leo. She was still crying, but quieter now, like grief instead of panic. You look like him. You sound almost like him. But you're not. Why do you say that? Because Leo was kind. She said it simply, like stating a fact. Leo was gentle. Leo looked at me like... She stopped. You look at me like I'm going to break. Julian sat in the chair beside her bed, close enough that she could see him clearly. What if I told you I am Leo? I wouldn't believe you. Why not? Because Leo would never. She gestured vaguely at his suit, his watch, the controlled set of his shoulders. He wasn't this. He was studying economics on a scholarship. He wore second-hand clothes. He was saving every penny to support his mother. He didn't have money for designer suits. People change in 10 years, Eva. Not this much. Nobody changes this much. Her eyes met his, and Julian saw the exact moment she made the connection. Unless something made them, he should have denied it, should have deflected. But looking at her, at this version of Eva, who still believed in him, who was mourning the loss of a man he deliberately killed, he found himself incapable of lying. "You're right," he said quietly. "Leo's gone." She made a small, hurt sound. "What happened to him?" "I buried him." The confession came out like gravel. Deliberately, systematically. "I took everything he was, and I destroyed it." Why? Such a simple question. Such an impossibly complicated answer. Because your world doesn't have room for people like Leo. Julian's voice was flat, factual. Because being kind in corporate America is blood in the water. Because I watched your father's business partners eat him alive at negotiating tables, and I realized that the only way to protect you, to deserve you, was to become something harder. You thought I needed protection? I thought I needed to be worthy of you. Eva was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, sharper. "You're talking about my father's company." "Yes. In 2016, I was being groomed to take over. Dad was teaching me everything. I was learning the business, making connections, proving I could handle it." She watched his face carefully. What happened with that? This was it, the moment where he could shape the narrative or tell the truth. Julian found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He chose honesty. "You married me," he said. 2 years after the accident you don't remember. You stepped back from the company to support my career. I told you it made sense, that I could be the public face while you handled things behind the scenes. But that's not what happened. What happened? I took over, completely. I made decisions without you. I pushed your father into semi-retirement. I built what exists now, Vance Industries, on the foundation of his company. He forced himself to hold her gaze. I took everything that was supposed to be yours, and I made it mine. He expected anger, accusations. Instead, Eva just looked sad. "And what did I do?" she asked. "While you were taking over my life? You tried to fight me, at first. Then you tried to work with me. Eventually, he stopped, started again. Eventually, you just stopped trying. Did I love you?" Her voice was small. "The me from now, did she love you?" Julian thought about the woman Eva had become, the one who flinched when he raised his voice, who stopped arguing because she'd learned it never mattered, who'd called him tonight terrified and alone because she had no one else to call. "No," he said. "She was afraid of me." Eva's hand moved, and Julian braced for her to pull away. Instead, she reached for him. Her fingers found his wrist, pressed against his pulse point. "I don't believe you," she said. "Eva, I don't believe that Leo, that you, turned into someone cruel just because the business world is hard. I don't believe you destroyed yourself just to prove you were worthy. That's not how love works." Her thumb traced circles on his wrist, the same way she used to do when they studied together. When she was trying to keep him present, instead of lost in his head. What really happened? What aren't you telling me? Julian looked at this impossible girl, this woman who shouldn't exist, who was seeing him with 18-year-old eyes and calling him on his lies the way she always used to, and felt something inside him crack wider. "I was scared," he whispered. "Every single day. Scared I wasn't good enough. Scared your father would realize you'd made a mistake with me. Scared that everyone who said I was just after your money was right. So I became someone nobody could question. Someone hard enough that fear couldn't touch me. And did it work? Yes. Are you still scared? The question landed like a knife, because Julian realized the answer was yes. He was terrified. He'd been terrified for a decade, and he'd translated that fear into cruelty, because cruelty felt like control. I lost you, he said. Somewhere in becoming the man I thought I needed to be, I lost the woman I became that man for. And I didn't even notice until... He stopped. He couldn't tell her about the phone call. Not yet. Until it was too late. Eva was quiet. Her hand stayed on his wrist, feeling his pulse, probably reading all the things he wasn't saying. I want to meet her, she said finally. Meet who? The woman I became. The one who was afraid of you. I want to understand what happened between 18-year-old me and 28-year-old me. Because right now, I don't recognize the choices she made. Her eyes found his. And I don't recognize you. But I think maybe I need to, before my memories come back. Before I remember all the reasons I should hate you. Why would you want that? Because you look at me like I'm a ghost. Her voice was gentle. Like you're mourning something you killed. And I need to know, is the person I was worth mourning? Or am I better off not remembering? Julian had no answer for that. Because the truth was, he didn't know anymore if he'd destroyed Eva, or if she'd just evolved into someone different. Someone his cruelty had forced her to become. All he knew was that the woman in front of him, this echo of who she used to be, was looking at him with compassion instead of contempt. And he wanted to be worthy of that look so badly it physically hurt. I'll tell you everything, he promised. But Eva, when you remember, when your memories come back, I need you to know that I would give anything to go back, to be Leo again, to choose differently. You can't go back. I know. But maybe, she squeezed his wrist, maybe you can choose differently from here. It was more than he deserved. It was grace he hadn't earned. It was an 18-year-old girl offering salvation to the man who destroyed her future self. Julian took her hand in both of his and did something he hadn't done in 10 years. He let himself cry. They discharged Eva 3 days later. Julian had spent those days in a state of controlled chaos, trying to prepare for her return to a world she wouldn't recognize. First problem, the penthouse. Eva remembered a cramped studio apartment near campus, where Leo had lived on instant ramen and ambition. The $50 million penthouse overlooking the city would be a shock. Second problem, her clothes. Her current wardrobe was all designer labels, carefully curated by the personal stylist Julian had insisted she use. The Eva who'd just woken up wore vintage band t-shirts and jeans with artful tears. Third problem, Elena and Marcus. And every other person in Julian's current life who Eva wouldn't know, wouldn't remember, wouldn't understand. He'd tried to solve the first problem by having several rooms redecorated in a style closer to what Eva was used to. He'd failed miserably. Even simple furniture in this neighborhood cost more than her old apartment's annual rent. He'd solved the second problem by buying out a vintage clothing store. An employee had looked at him like he was insane when he'd asked for clothes an 18-year-old heiress with good taste but casual style would wear. He'd left with 17 bags. The third problem had no solution. He could only minimize the damage. Ready? He asked Eva, who was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, dressed in jeans and a sweater he'd brought her. She looked impossibly young in casual clothes, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of styled. "No," she said honestly, "but I don't think I'll get more ready by waiting." The drive to the penthouse was quiet. Eva spent most of it staring out the window, her expression growing more troubled as she recognized some landmarks, but not others, as she saw buildings that hadn't existed in her memory standing where familiar places should be. 10 years, she murmured at one point. I keep saying it, but it doesn't feel real. It will, Julian said, and immediately regretted it, because when it felt real, she'd remember everything, including why she'd stopped loving him. The penthouse was worse than he'd anticipated. Eva walked in, looked around at the floor-to-ceiling windows, a designer furniture, the art collection, and went very still. "This is where we live?" Her voice was faint. "Yes. This apartment costs more than my father's company made in a year." "Your father's company is worth 30 billion now. Julian corrected himself. I run it." Eva walked to the window, pressed her hand against the glass. From here, you could see the entire city spread out like a circuit board, lights beginning to glow in the dusk. "What happened to the studio apartment?" she asked. "The one by campus with the broken heater and the neighbors who played mariachi music at 3 a.m.? "I sold it 7 years ago." "Did I mind?" Julian thought about the fight they'd had, how Eva had cried that the apartment was the last place she remembered being truly happy, how he'd told her she was being sentimental about a shithole, how she'd stopped crying mid-sob, her face going blank in that way he'd learned to dread. "Yes," he said. "You minded." Eva nodded like she'd expected that answer. She turned back to the room, and Julian watched her take inventory. The modern furniture, the impersonal art, the space that looked like a magazine spread instead of a home. "Did I choose any of this?" she asked. "The designer chose it." "Did I want a designer?" "I thought you did." "You thought or you decided?" The question hung between them. Julian had no good answer. Eva walked through the penthouse, opening doors, finding rooms. The master bedroom with its California king and silk sheets. The office with its view of the city. The guest room that had never hosted a guest because Eva had no friends anymore. He'd made sure of that, systematically making her uncomfortable every time she tried to maintain relationships outside of him. She found the closet, walked in, stared at racks of designer dresses, shelves of expensive shoes. "I don't recognize a single piece," she said. "Not one." "Your style changed, or you changed it." She pulled out a cocktail dress, black and severe. "This looks like something Elena would wear." Julian froze. "How do you know Elena?" "I don't, but there are pictures of you with her on the coffee table. Professional photos from some charity gala." Eva turned to face him. "Is she the affair?" "It's not, we're not." Julian stopped. Started again. "It's complicated." "Complicated means yes." Eva's voice was flat. "Let me guess. She works for you. You spend more time with her than with me. Everyone assumes you're sleeping together. And you never bother correcting them because it's useful. It makes you look powerful, desirable." Every word was accurate. Every word landed like a physical blow. "Eva, is she beautiful?" "Yes." "More beautiful than me?" Julian looked at his wife, really looked at her. Eva had always been beautiful, but there was something ethereal about 18-year-old Eva. A light that hadn't been dimmed yet, a confidence that hadn't been systematically destroyed. "No," he said. "Nobody is more beautiful than you." "But you wanted her anyway." "But I can't, because you're telling me the truth. And the man I fell in love with, Leo, he always told me the truth, even when it hurt him." She looked up, met his eyes. So I need to know. Is Leo really dead? Or is he still in there somewhere, buried under Julian Vance, the billionaire? Julian had asked himself that question 1,000 times, usually at 3 a.m., when he couldn't sleep. When he'd watch Eva's back turn toward him in bed and wonder when exactly she'd stopped wanting to touch him. "I don't know," he admitted. "I thought he was dead. I thought I'd killed him completely. But then you woke up and you looked at me the way you used to. And something—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Something woke up too. Something I thought was gone. Then bring him back." "Eva, I don't know if I can. It's been 10 years. I've made choices, built a life, become someone you hate." She said it gently. "Julian, you spent 10 years becoming powerful enough that nothing could hurt you. But you're miserable. I can see it. You're living in this perfect apartment, running a billion-dollar company, and you're more trapped than Leo ever was in that studio with no heat." She was right. God, she was right. Julian had built a prison and called it success. How do I fix it? The question came out raw. How do I become someone you could love again? I don't know if you can. Not with me, not with the me who remembers everything. Eva stood, walked to where he sat, crouched down so they were eye level. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is becoming someone you can love. Someone you don't have to bury. Her hand found his face, thumb brushing his cheek. "I'm going to remember, Julian. The doctors say it could happen any time. Tomorrow, next week, next month. And when I do, I want you to be someone I can love. I'm going to remember every cruel word, every dismissal, every time you chose your ego over my dignity." Her voice was steady. "And I don't know if I'll be able to forgive you." "I know. But until then, while I still have this weird grace period where I remember who you were and not what you became, I'm going to do something probably stupid." "What?" "I'm going to give you a chance to figure out who you want to be when I remember. Because that's the man I'll be deciding about. Not Leo, not Julian, whoever you choose to become in the time we have left." It was more than he deserved. It was a gift he hadn't earned. It was 18-year-old Eva seeing the best in him one more time, even knowing he'd destroyed her future self. "Why?" Julian's voice cracked. "Why would you do that?" "Because Leo once told me that people deserve to be judged on who they're trying to become, not just who they were." She smiled, sad and small. "And because I loved him, even if he's gone, even if you killed him, I loved him enough to give you this." Julian pulled her close, buried his face in her shoulder, and let himself break completely. And Eva held him, this broken version of the man she'd loved, and whispered the words that would haunt him. "Don't waste it. Please don't waste it." The next morning, Julian made a call he should have made years ago. "Robert, it's Julian. I need to talk to you about the company." Eva's father met him for lunch at a quiet restaurant, the kind where deals were made and empires changed hands. Robert Cheng looked older than his 60 years, the weight of semi-forced retirement sitting heavy on his shoulders. "How is she?" Robert asked before they'd even ordered. "Confused, angry, grieving for a version of herself she doesn't remember losing." Julian met his father-in-law's eyes. "She thinks it's 2016. She remembers you teaching her the business. She remembers being your heir." Robert's expression did something complicated. "And what did you tell her?" "The truth, that I took it from her, from both of you." "You didn't take it, Julian. I gave it to you. I thought, Robert stopped. I thought you'd protect her. Instead, you used my company as a weapon to control her. I know. Do you? Robert's voice was sharp. Because my daughter called me last week. The old Eva, the one you broke, she called me crying. Saying she couldn't do it anymore, that she felt like she was drowning, that she didn't know who she was. And do you know what I told her? Julian shook his head. I told her to leave you. I told her she could come back to the company, that I'd help her rebuild. I told her she was worth more than what you'd reduced her to. Robert's hands clenched, and she said no. She said she didn't remember how to be that person anymore. That you'd taken so much of her that she didn't know what would be left if she left you. The words landed like bullets. Because Julian remembered that phone call. Eva had come home that night quiet, distant. He'd asked what was wrong, and she'd said, nothing, everything's fine. And he'd been relieved because fine meant he didn't have to deal with emotions, didn't have to confront what he was doing to her. I'm giving it back, Julian said. What? The company. Your company. I'm giving it back. He pulled papers from his briefcase. I had my lawyers draw this up last night. It transfers controlling interest back to Eva. Once her memory returns, once she's ready, she can run it the way she was meant to. Robert stared at the documents. You're serious? Yes. Why now? Because she doesn't remember hating you? Because I want to become someone she doesn't have to hate. Julian's voice was steady. Because Leo would have wanted this, would have wanted her to have what was rightfully hers. And I want to be him again, even if it's too late. Robert was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. It might not be enough, son. I know. She might remember everything and still leave you. I know that too. But you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it anyway. Robert took the papers, scanned them, and something in his expression softened. The Leo I knew, the one my daughter fell in love with, he would have done this. But that boy never would have needed to. That boy died because I was afraid I wasn't enough, Julian said quietly. I'm trying to figure out if I can bring him back. Can you? I don't know, but Eva asked me to try, and that's more than I deserve. They finished lunch in careful conversation, rebuilding a bridge that had been burning for years. When they parted, Robert gripped Julian's shoulder. Don't hurt her again, he said, because if you do, there's nothing in this world that will stop me from destroying everything you've built. If I hurt her again, Julian said, help me. That evening, Julian came home to find Eva in his office. Their office now, he supposed. She was at his desk, his laptop open, her face pale. What are you doing? He asked carefully. Research. She gestured at the screen. I've been reading about us, about Vance Industries, about the merger, the acquisitions, the growth. She looked up, and her eyes were hard. I've also been reading about the lawsuits, the employees you fired without cause, the competitors you crushed using tactics that were barely legal, the charities you defunded because they didn't provide good PR. Julian's stomach dropped. Eva, is this who you are now? Her voice shook. Is this what becoming powerful enough meant? Hurting people? Using the company my father built on integrity as a weapon? Yes. There was no point in lying. Did I know, the me from before? Did she know what you were doing? You tried to stop me, in the beginning, but I told you it was necessary, that this is how business works, that you were too soft. Julian forced himself to continue. Eventually, you stopped asking, stopped checking, stopped caring what I did with the company. Because I'd given up. Because I made it clear your opinion didn't matter. Eva closed the laptop. I found something else, too. Email drafts, dozens of them, all addressed to you, all unsent. I didn't know those existed. They're in a hidden folder labeled Things I'll Never Say. She pulled out her phone, opened a file, started reading. Julian, I don't know who you are anymore. But worse, I don't know who I am. I look in the mirror and see a stranger wearing my face. When did I become so small? When did I stop fighting? When did I learn to flinch before you even speak? Julian closed his eyes. Hearing his wife's words she'd never had the courage to send, was worse than any accusation. Eva continued. I keep trying to remember the moment it changed, when you stopped being Leo and became someone who looks at me like I'm an inconvenience. Was it gradual? Or did it happen all at once and I just didn't notice? I think I'm afraid to find out. Because if it was gradual, that means I let it happen. And if it was sudden, that means I missed the moment I could have saved us. Stop, Julian whispered. Please stop. There are 47 drafts, Eva said. Some of them are from 4 years ago. Some are from last month. They get sadder as they go on. She met his eyes. The last one was drafted 3 days before the accident. Want to know what it says? No. I can't do this anymore. But I don't know how to leave. I don't remember how to be alone. I don't remember how to be anything except your wife. And that terrifies me more than staying. The silence that followed was suffocating. She was going to leave you, Eva said quietly. The me you destroyed, she was finally finding the courage to leave. And then the accident happened, and now she's gone, and I'm here instead. This weird echo who doesn't remember being destroyed, who still thinks you're Leo. I know. Do you see how fucked up this is? Her voice rose. You spent years breaking me down, and now you get a do-over with a version of me who doesn't remember. It's like the universe gave you exactly what you wanted, a wife who looks at you with love instead of fear. It's not what I wanted. Then what did you want? She stood, and Julian saw real anger in her eyes for the first time. What was the end game, Julian? Did you want a trophy wife who was too broken to question you? Did you want someone who was so dependent on you she couldn't leave? Did you want to destroy me just to prove you could? I wanted to deserve you. The words exploded out of him. I wanted to be successful enough, powerful enough, important enough, that nobody could say I was just some poor kid who got lucky. I wanted to be worthy of you. And it never occurred to you that Leo already was? The question hit like a physical blow. That boy who tutored me in economics, who wore secondhand clothes and worked 2 jobs to support his mother, looked at me like I was the brilliant person he'd ever met. He was already worthy. I chose him. Not his money, not his power, not his empire. Him. And you, her voice broke. You killed him because you thought he wasn't enough. Julian had no defense, because she was right. He'd spent 10 years becoming someone he thought Eva should want, never asking if she actually wanted that person. I had lunch with your father today, he said finally. I'm giving the company back to you. Controlling interest, full authority, everything. Once your memory returns, once you're ready, it's yours. Eva stared at him. Why? Because it should have been yours all along. Because I took it from you to control you, and I don't want to be that person anymore. And what will you do without the company? I don't know. Figure out who I am without it. Maybe go back to school. Maybe start over. He gave a hollow laugh. Maybe see if Leo's actually dead or just hibernating. Eva walked to the window, looked out at the city lights. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. The woman who wrote those emails, she loved you. Even at the end, even after everything, there's love in those words. Sad love, broken love, but love. She turned back to face him. That's what makes this whole thing tragic. She kept hoping you'd change, kept believing Leo was still in there somewhere. And you never gave her proof that he was. I'm trying now. I know, but Julian? She walked back to him, stopped close enough that he could see the tears on her cheeks. Trying now doesn't erase what you did. Giving back the company doesn't undo the isolation, the control, the systematic destruction of who I was. You don't get to hurt someone for years and then buy forgiveness with a grand gesture. I know that. Do you? Because you're looking at me like this is some romantic redemption arc. Like if you grovel enough, if you change enough, I'll fall in love with you again and we'll live happily ever after. That's exactly what you're thinking. But here's the truth. I'm not a prize you can win back. The woman I was, the one who loved you, she's gone. And when my memory returns, the woman who remembers what you did, she's going to have to decide if she can live with a man who is capable of that cruelty, who chose ego over love, who let her beg for help and hung up. The last sentence landed like a grenade. Eva's eyes widened. He hadn't told her about the phone call, about the poker table, about Elena answering her call while he watched, while his business rivals listened to her fear. Eva, what do you mean I begged for help and you hung up? Her voice was shaking. He chose the truth. You called me. You were at the office, and something was wrong. You were dizzy, scared. You asked me to pick you up. His voice was mechanical, factual. I was at a poker game with business rivals. Elena was there. We'd been fighting a lot. I thought you were faking, trying to guilt me into leaving the game. Oh God. I put you on speakerphone. Let everyone listen to you beg. I told you to stop performing. He forced himself to continue. You said you couldn't see the road. You said you were scared. And I laughed. I hung up. 5 minutes later, Marcus, one of the men at the table, got the call about the accident. We heard the crash through the phone, but we didn't know it was real until the police called. Julian's voice cracked. I thought you were manipulating me. And by the time I realized you were actually in danger, you were already gone, Eva finished. That version of me was already gone. Yes, she sat down hard, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Did they hear? Your business rivals. Did they hear me crash? Yes. And what did you do? I stopped breathing. I stopped thinking. The memory was visceral, sharp. Marcus had to shake me to make me understand what happened. And then I ran. I left everything there. My phone, my jacket, my car. And I ran to the hospital. But it was too late. It was too late. Eva was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. That woman, the one who called you, she was at the end. She'd finally decided to leave you, and she called one last time. Maybe to test if there was anything left worth saving. And you failed the test. Yes. And now I'm here instead of her. This weird second chance. And you're trying to save something that was already dead before the accident. Julian couldn't argue. Because she was right. He'd killed their marriage long before that phone call. The crash had just made it official. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quietly. I don't expect you to love me. I don't even expect you to stay when your memory returns. But Eva, I need you to know if I could go back, if I could be Leo again, I would choose you every time. Not the empire, not the power, just you. Eva wiped her eyes. But you can't go back. I can't go back. So what happens now? It was the question everything had been building toward. What happens to a marriage that was dead before one spouse got amnesia? What happens to a man trying to resurrect a version of himself he deliberately killed? What happens when the woman you love has forgotten she stopped loving you? Now, Julian said, you decide. You decide if you want to leave, if you want to call your father, if you want to never see me again. And whatever you choose, I'll respect it. I'll sign whatever papers you want. I'll disappear if that's what you need. And if I stay, while I wait for my memory to come back, I'll spend every day trying to become someone worthy of that choice. I'll go back to therapy. I'll work on myself. I'll figure out who I am without the armor. He met her eyes. I'll try to resurrect Leo. And if I can't, if he's really dead, I'll try to become someone better than Julian. Eva was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I'm not staying for you. I want to be clear about that. I'm staying because I need to understand what happened to me. I need to see if the woman I became had any agency, any power, or if you really did destroy her completely. She stood. And I'm staying because when my memory comes back, I want to know who I'm choosing between. The man you were, the man you became, or the man you might be. I understand. I'm also calling Sophia, my best friend. The one you made me lose. If she'll talk to me, if she'll forgive me for choosing you over her, I need her. Eva's voice was firm. You don't get to isolate me again. You don't get to control who I talk to or what I do. I wouldn't. You would. You did. So I'm telling you now. I make my own choices. I see who I want. I rebuild what you burned down. And if you have a problem with that, then this ends right here. It was an ultimatum. It was boundaries. It was 18-year-old Eva's strength reasserting itself. And Julian, who'd spent 10 years tearing down her walls, found himself grateful to see them going back up. Okay, he said, whatever you need. I need space. I need time. I need you to prove you're serious about change, not just panicking because I forgot I hate you. How do I prove that? Eva considered. Start by moving to the guest room. We're not sharing a bed. Not while I'm figuring this out. Done. Start therapy. Not couples therapy. Individual therapy. Figure out why you became this. I'll call someone tomorrow. And Julian? She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. Stop looking at me like I'm going to save you. I can't. Only you can do that. Then she was gone, leaving Julian alone in the office with the ghosts of every choice that had brought him here. He pulled out his phone, found the contact he'd been avoiding for years. His therapist, the one he'd stopped seeing when she gently suggested his marriage was unhealthy, that his need for control was destroying the woman he loved. This is Julian Vance. I need an appointment. As soon as possible. I think I'm ready to hear what you've been trying to tell me. The response came quickly. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. I've kept your slot open. I had a feeling you'd call eventually. Julian looked around the office. The empire he'd built, the power he'd accumulated, the success that had cost him everything that actually mattered. And he made a decision. He was going to tear it all down. Not the company. That was Eva's now. But the armor, the cruelty, the version of himself he'd constructed to survive a world that Leo couldn't navigate. He was going to find out if you could excavate a buried person, if you could resurrect who you used to be, if it was too late to save Leo, or if maybe it was finally the right time to let him live again. Drop your answer in the comments. Can someone who hurt you this badly really change? Would you give them the chance? Or is there a point where love isn't enough?